I've been sitting with the idea that what I want to make isn't exciting in the way that the internet rewards. In this video, I want to push back against aesthetic obsession, algorithmic anxiety, hyper-optimized personal branding, and the pressure to summarize a human life into a tagline. So that if you're like me, you can stop the constant rebrands and start sharing what's really inside of you, waiting to be expressed and find its community. I have been using Canva for 5 years. My early designs were related to the first African society I founded at my university, promoting our events, African voices, and sharing African stories. And then 3 years ago, Adjoaainghana was born. I wanted to start sharing my own stories and the stories that were inspiring me online, but I fell into the aesthetic trap. And along the way was so driven by validation that I changed the entire concept from Adjoaainghana to Adjoaa's perspective, which was suggested by somebody close to me who said that Adjoaainghana was too narrow and region specific. I find aesthetics fun. They are part of what bringing a vision to life entails. But looking back at the content I was making on Canva, I can see that a lot of my time was going into the presentation of things rather than the meaning behind it all. I was also afraid, and so I think the time that I was spending on making everything look good was me actually compensating for the fact that I wasn't comfortable with what I was sharing under a concept that I didn't even like. And so I would be very careful about who you take advice from and pay close attention to what you actually think. I have seen firsthand how consumption dilutes voice. How do we even know what we actually think when we're taking in so many different opinions and perspectives? During the days of Adjoaa's perspective, which, if I wasn't clear, is an online presence I made about 2 years ago after listening to bad advice, I was actually going through some difficult experiences, and this made me listen online to a lot of different advice videos, and I became super fixated on what everyone else was doing and saying. Maybe you've gone through a similar thing online, and what I find really interesting is that when you're watching a lot of these advice-based or personal development focused content, you're tricked into thinking that you're actually becoming clearer on your own goals and decisions, when in reality, the more of these videos that you're watching, you're actually not progressing forward, because you're not spending your time taking action, but you're spending your time listening to people who have taken action. What happens is you end up absorbing other people's ways of thinking, presenting, and even talking to the point where you no longer feel confident in your own ideas and you don't feel like they're worth sharing. You feel like what you want to say has already been said so many times and begin comparing yourself to others and your confidence crashes. A couple of my friends, one in particular, really stand by the phrase, create more than you consume. And taking this advice, I've now revived Adjoaainghana into what you're seeing right now. I would recommend, if you haven't already, selecting a few creators, maximum 1 or 2, that you enjoy consuming, who make you feel good about your own voice, and stop watching the rest. For me, this has meant that the time I would spend watching other people, I have now reinvested into myself and Adjoaainghana. And trust me, you need a lot of time for your own projects, more than what you may think. Let me know if you're going to do this or are trying to do this already in the comments. Personal branding is undoubtedly important, and the way we position ourselves should be intentional. However, as humans, we are multi-passionate. I think that term has been narrowly used to refer to business owners and creatives, when in reality, we can all fit within that definition to some extent. Like me, you may have come across the branding advice that tells you to niche down and fit your biography into a certain formula. I know for myself, it just got to a point where I had to stop trying to summarize myself in a few words and just start creating. I also found that the creators I do love consuming don't obsess over taglines and niching down. And because of that, their brands naturally take shape into something beautiful, deeper, meaningful, and resonant with our hearts. Let's look at some examples. Cameron, who is also an Australian like me and who creates meditative travel vlogs. She has a bio, the creative act of life. Or take Hitomi, for example, who has one that says, watch my latest YouTube video. To me, their pages tell a story through their voices and expression. And to me, it seems like they put more of their energy into embodying what they want people to see rather than telling people what they want them to see. With the content coming to this channel, I'm really trying to focus on being consistent with posting and putting all of my energy into the heart behind the videos rather than the branding. If you're on a similar path, I'd love to know more about your process, how you decide what themes to share, and whether you think just posting is an antidote to branding obsession. I have had quick dopamine hits from TikTok and Instagram. A few of my videos on TikTok blew up and I was receiving a steady stream of new followers every day. But what I find interesting is that a thoughtful comment under one of my YouTube videos, which thank you so much because there's been some really insightful comments on my past few videos, a comment like that is much more meaningful to me than a bunch of likes. There is something about the long form content that YouTube promotes that allows for contradictions, pauses, and evolution over time. If you're watching this like me, you probably value thinking slowly too. The creators I love watching, I would gladly give 30 minutes of my time or even more watching their content compared to scrolling for the same amount of time on Instagram or TikTok. In fact, Lynette, a creator I've watched on here for years, was speaking about this in a video, and I can't remember which video it was, but she was speaking to the fact that many smaller creators find success on YouTube because they enjoy the process of creating. They're in it for the longer run and they are okay with slower progress. It requires a bit of effort, but the reason why I've loved YouTube since I was 14 and why I would recommend it as a platform to grow on is because it builds community and it leaves room for the parts of life that aren't a highlight reel to be shared in a more authentic way. As I was sharing earlier, the days of Adjoaa's perspective were very misaligned to the content that I wanted to create. But if you, like me, have rebranded yourself due to validation or an obsession with getting your personal branding right, then take the lessons that you've learned from that time. I think boundaries are very important and they'll be different for you and I, but what I would suggest is writing a list of topics that you don't feel comfortable sharing about.
Addressing their trauma or things that are happening with their immediate families, giving wildly detailed story times, doxing people, just giving so much information to this digital portal.
And then some personal branding advice that I do support and that I do think allows for us to bring our varied perspectives and interests into our content is to identify your different content buckets to give you some kind of direction and starting point for coming up with your content ideas. I have done this, and questions I feel comfortable engaging with in my content, which also connect to my content pillars, are how do we as young adults in Ghana and beyond thrive when we face challenges like underemployment and unemployment? What does being empowered as a young adult look like in Ghana and beyond? How does it feel to live across different countries, cultures, and how do we find belonging, especially for diasporans or travelers? These questions come from my lived experience as a young adult navigating my career that has become more globally focused and who has had an academic and personal interest in Africa for a very long time. I'm finally finding my voice and have found home with adjoaainghana, which was my original brainchild, but as we heard, I got lost along the way. But we're back, and you are very welcome, Akwaaba, to this space. If any of this is resonating with you, I'd love for you to subscribe or start a conversation in the comments. Actually, if you're a creator too, I would love to know what themes your content engages with. I invite you to see your own experiences, voices, and ideas as having inherent value. You don't need to watch any more branding videos or advice videos about how other people have started their social media journeys. If there's anything you take away from this video, I want it to be that if you want to build community and find confidence in your own voice, then meaning is more important than aesthetics. And so spend your time, which is one of our most valuable resources, finding meaning in your own experiences, and less time focused on performing for others and gaining their validation. Cut down your screen time, narrow down to watching a couple of your favorite creators, clarify what your boundaries online are going to be, and invest your time into your real life and projects, and watch your confidence rise and ideas blossom.